The night air clung to my skin as I stepped out of my car, the uneven streetlights casting long, trembling shadows across the cracked asphalt. Los Angeles was quieter than usual at this hour. Maybe it was the chill, maybe it was the hospital itself. Either way, I could feel the tension coiling in my chest before I even reached the side entrance. I hated this job. Being a sewer diver was not glamorous. It was dangerous, disgusting, and lonely. Most nights I smelled decay that no shower could ever remove. Tonight, I had a shift at St. Matthew's Hospital, a massive aging building that had seen more death than life in its 100-year history. My paycheck said $25,000 a month. My conscience said I was losing pieces of myself with every dive. I pulled my gloves tighter, adjusted the straps of my helmet, and checked the oxygen tank one last time. The metallic clang of the valve echoed in the quiet lot. My reflection in the puddle was distorted, hunched over, almost a stranger. I swallowed the knot in my throat and pushed the thoughts away. The man at the security desk barely looked at me. He didn't care that I was entering the tunnels beneath the hospital. Nobody did. That was the deal. Nobody cared until it was too late. The stairwell leading to the basement smelled of damp concrete and mold. I descended slowly, the echo of my boots bouncing off the walls. Each step brought me closer to the underworld, closer to what I feared, yet needed. The deeper I went, the heavier the air became. My light cut through darkness that seemed to have depth, a darkness thick enough to swallow sound itself. I reached the first chamber, a junction of pipes and maintenance corridors. Water pooled in the corners, reflecting my light in distorted patterns. My eyes adjusted to the dim glow, and that's when I saw it. A body, not fresh, not like anything I could ignore. It was skeletal, partially clothed in hospital scrubs. The skull stared at me with empty sockets, jaw agape, as if in mid-scream. The bones were slick with something dark, something wet that smelled of rot. I swallowed hard, gripping the railing for balance. I had seen bodies before, tades of pipes beneath the city held secrets, but this one felt different, personal, intentional. I took a step closer, my boots slipping in the sludge. The fingers of the skeleton were curved, clawing at the floor. I turned my light downward and noticed something else, more shapes in the water, shadows that didn't match the walls. A hand. No, a whole arm emerging, grasping at the dark surface. My heart pounded, and I told myself it was imagination. Water warps shadows. Bones shift with currents. But even then, I felt eyes on me. I tried to focus on the task. A broken valve near the ICU wing needed clearing. It should have been routine. It never was. Every pipe I crawled through carried whispers of water, of air, of something else. I lowered myself into the first tunnel, the opening slick with black residue. The smell hit me in full force. I gagged. There was a sweetness to it, mixed with iron and rot. I could not tell if it came from the water, the walls, or something else. My mask filtered most of it, but my stomach churned as I moved forward. The tunnel seemed to shift. The walls weren't just concrete anymore, they bulged, veins rising beneath the surface. My flashlight caught something writhing in the corner. I froze. Something moved under the water, too large for a rat, too deliberate for a shadow. Then I heard the whisper, a voice, low, almost human, but wet and broken. It said my name. Not in the air around me, but inside my head. David. I dropped my light. The beam spun across the tunnel walls, catching bones, sludge, something half hidden behind pipes. I bent over to pick it up, and the water surged toward me like a wave, though no current existed. My boots slipped. My gloves scraped against the floor. I fell, hitting the wet stone. The voice came again, closer this time, louder. David, David. I scrambled upright, my heart hammering. My mask fogged from panic, and my flashlight flickered, then stabilized. In the beam, I saw it, another skeleton. This one upright, hospital gown, hanging from brittle bones. It tilted its head toward me. I froze. Something about it was wrong. The skull had features, a mouth shaped like a scream, teeth uneven, eyes deep pits, but they seemed to focus on me. I felt a pulse in the water beneath my boots, rhythmic, deliberate. The air itself seemed to hum with it. I wanted to run. I wanted to climb back to the stairs, to the street, to the safety of air and light. But the valve still needed clearing. I had no choice. I gritted my teeth and pushed forward. The tunnel narrowed. My flashlight caught another figure, then another. Skeletons' bodies, half decayed, strewn in the water, leaning against walls, crawling on each other in grotesque formations. Some faces were familiar. Faces from old hospital records I had seen on TV. Missing patients, unsolved cases. They were here, waiting, watching. I held my breath. My boots slid through water deeper than I expected. The current of something beneath pushed against me. I tried to call out, but my voice was swallowed by the tunnel. No echo returned. Just the slap of water against concrete. Then a hand skeletal clutched my ankle. I yelped, spinning around, flashlight jerking. Nothing. Just sludge. Just shadows. I swallowed bile. I reminded myself, these tunnels were alive with decay. I had seen worse. I had survived worse. But tonight, something was different. The walls pulsed again. Veins bulged beneath the concrete. My light caught a flicker of movement, a face. Not fully skeleton, not fully flesh. My pulse spiked. The thing tilted its head toward me, lips stretched in a grin that should not exist. I moved backward, careful, deliberate. The water rippled around my boots. I felt the weight of 1,000 eyes in the dark, following my every step. The path to the valve opened ahead. I rushed forward, fingers gripping the pipe. The valve turned, water gushed. I had done it. Routine completed. But the celebration was short-lived. Behind me, the skeletal figures moved. Slowly at first, then faster. The one with the human-like face emerged from the water. The grin was gone, replaced by a scream, a silent scream. Empty sockets boring into me. I ran, through the sludge, past the bones, past the whispers in the walls. My flashlight wavered, sputtered. My mask was fogged. My gloves were slick with something I did not want to know. Then I saw a tunnel leading deeper, deeper than I had planned. A faint glow, a voice, my sister's voice. I froze, my breath caught, my heart twisted. That voice should not have been here. She had died years ago, but it called my name again, gentle, pleading, familiar. I swallowed. My body betrayed me. I stepped forward, into the glow. The walls shifted. The air grew thick. My flashlight illuminated a figure half skeleton, half flesh, twisting impossibly. The grin widened, teeth too long, eyes too deep. And then, I saw her, or what looked like her. My sister, pale, wet, reaching for me. I wanted to run. I wanted to scream. But my legs moved forward, drawn by something I could not resist. Something alive. Something waiting beneath St. Matthew's. And then the tunnel closed behind me. The sound of water was everywhere. Breathing whispers, scraping bones, and the darkness pressed close. I was inside, fully inside, and the real nightmare had just begun. The tunnel closed behind me with a wet, grinding sound that made my stomach churn. Darkness swallowed everything I had known, my flashlight barely cutting through the black. The smell of rot was thicker here, pungent, metallic, curling into my sinuses until I gagged. I swallowed, forcing myself to breathe. My sister, no, the apparition of her was still there, pale and wet, reaching toward me. I stumbled forward, boots slipping in the black sludge. Water gushed from broken pipes in a low, incessant roar. Every step I took echoed strangely, as if the tunnel were alive, mocking me, counting me. The air itself seemed to resist my movements, thick and viscous, making every muscle work twice as hard. And then I heard it, a whisper. Soft, wet, deliberate. My name, David. I froze. My heart thudded painfully. The voice wasn't coming from the direction I had seen the pale figure. It came from everywhere at once, from the walls, from the water, from the shadows crawling in, the corners of my eyes. David. I forced myself to move again. The tunnel opened into a wider chamber, concrete ceiling arched high above. The water here was ankle-deep, swirling black like ink. Shapes moved beneath its surface. I couldn't tell what was real, what was reflection. Something touched my ankle, cold, slick, not water, not a fish, human fingers. I yelped, yanked my leg free. The light caught a skeleton rising from the water, arm outstretched, grasping for me. Its skull had the faintest remnants of hair, and its jaw was broken in a silent scream. Behind it, another figure surfaced, more human, more wrong. Skin sagged, over bone, eyes deep pits, but somehow alive. I ran. Every step sent water splashing. My gloves were soaked, my mask fogged from panic. The walls of the chamber seemed to close in, veins bulging beneath concrete, pulsing like the heartbeat of the place itself. Every shadow moved, every whisper followed. The further I went, the more the tunnel itself seemed alive, guiding me, teasing me. Ahead, the glow I had glimpsed before pulsed softly. It was faint, white, almost inviting. I thought of stopping, turning back, abandoning whatever had drawn me here. But that voice, the one I couldn't place, called me forward. I stepped into the light. The figure was closer now. Something that wore her face hovered above the sludge on a slab of broken concrete. Her arms reached out to me. For a moment, relief surged through me. She was alive, real. I could save her. And then she screamed. Not a sound that traveled through the air. A scream that rattled my chest, reverberated in my bones, vibrated in my skull. Her face contorted, skin tearing and stretching unnaturally. Her mouth widened beyond human limits, teeth jagged and black. Eyes rolled back into her head. I stumbled, backward, almost falling into the black water. Something moved behind her, a column of flesh, pale and glistening, bulging with veins and writhing shapes inside. Hands pressed against its surface from the inside, trying to escape. Faces, screaming faces, silent, but screaming. And at the top, the surgeon's mask emerged, stitched tight, veins bulging, eyes black pits. I wanted to run. I wanted to scream, but my feet moved forward. I was drawn to her, to the glow, to the thing I knew was my sister, though it might not have been. The surgeon's voice filled my mind. Not through ears, but directly. A wet, pulsing sound that made my teeth ache. You cannot leave. The walls shivered. The water rippled. Limbs emerged. Hundreds of them, skeletal and wet, crawling, grasping, moving toward me in unison. My flashlight flickered. I swung it wildly, sparks flying, illuminating faces I recognized. Patients, hospital staff, long gone, all staring, all reaching. I grabbed a length of pipe and swung, solid, bone cracked. Another rose, hands outstretched. I slammed the pipe into the water. They fell back, but more took their place. The chamber was endless, a river of death flowing toward me. I realized then what this place was. Not just tunnels, not just decay. A living thing, feeding on fear, feeding on guilt, feeding on death. Every body I had seen, every skeleton, every corpse, it was sustenance. And I was now part of the menu. My sister, or the thing that looked like her, was the heart of it. The glow emanated from her, and with every pulse, the flesh column throbbed. Veins bulged, faces pressed from inside, screaming, and the surgeon floated above it, veins pulsing, stitched mask, gleaming wet. I had to reach her. I had to save her. I plunged forward, boots sliding in sludge, water lapping at my knees. Limbs grabbed, fingers tearing at my suit, pulling, yanking, desperate to hold me back. My flashlight sputtered. I swung it at every grasping hand, every skeletal arm. Sparks flew, flesh hissed. Shadows shrieked. I reached the slab, my hands wrapped around hers. She was real warm, alive, and yet, something beneath, something lurking, pulsing, feeding. I pulled with every ounce of strength, dragging her free from the slab. The column shrieked, a wet, ripping sound that echoed through the chamber. The surgeon reached. His hand, stitched and veined, tried to grab me. I pushed, shoved her out of reach, and we fell backward into the water. Limbs wrapped around us, dragging, pulling, faces pressing into mine. I remembered the drills, the valves, the broken pipes, a pattern. The place had weaknesses. I swung the pipe at the nearest vein, cutting into the column. Flesh tore, faces screamed. A black liquid surged from the wounds. The glow around my sister intensified. I pulled her up, stumbling through water, through limbs, through the writhing mass. The surgeon screamed inside my mind, wet and hollow. You cannot escape. I sprinted, each step harder than the last. The tunnel narrowed. The glow led us onward. Shapes emerged, limbs, bodies, crawling, stretching impossibly. Faces pressed against walls, mouths open, silent, screaming. We ran. The exit was close. I could feel the air changing, lighter, less thick. The pulsing beneath the concrete slowed. The water receded, but the whispers followed. The shadows stretched. I glanced back once. The column of flesh writhed, limbs reaching, faces screaming. The surgeon floated above it, mask stitched, eyes black pits, watching. The glow of my sister was a beacon in the chaos. Drawing me forward, I reached the next chamber, a junction of tunnels, pipes broken, valves exposed. I grabbed a flashlight, threw it at the nearest skeletal hand. Sparks erupted, flesh hissed, shadows recoiled. I heard a voice inside my skull, whispering, pleading, cruel. Return her. She waits below. She is mine. I gritted my teeth. I would not let it take her. Not again. I climbed the final stretch, water rising to my waist, sludge thickening. Limbs grabbed at us, hands tearing at clothing, dragging, pulling. I swung, shoved, kicked. My sister clung to me. Her eyes were wide, alive. Real. We emerged into a small chamber. A shaft of faint light pierced from above. The air smelled clean. My lungs burned. My gloves were slick with slime and blood. My suit soaked. My flashlight flickered. I turned to the column one last time. The surgeon's mask tilted, stitched smile widening. Veins pulsed. Faces pressed from inside, screaming. Then the glow of my sister pulsed, and the column shuddered, shrieked, and something inside seemed to recoil. I pulled her toward the ladder. Up, out of the water, up, into light. The tunnel behind us shifted, closing slowly, swallowing shadows. Swallowing limbs, swallowing the twisted echoes of the dead. We reached the stairwell to the hospital basement. My legs were shaking. My lungs screamed. My sister was alive, trembling wet, clinging to me for the first time. I thought we had survived, but even then, deep inside me, I felt it, watching, waiting. The darkness beneath St. Matthew's was patient, immortal, hungry, and our nightmare was far from over. The stairwell ended abruptly. Concrete stairs twisted impossibly beneath my feet. Every step groaned as if the building itself was alive, watching, judging. My sister clung to me, shivering, wet, but alive. I wanted to reassure her, to tell her it was over, but the air told a different story. It carried whispers, wet, hollow, echoing in my skull. The hospital above should have been safe. The fluorescent lights should have been solid, mundane. But as I emerged from the stairwell, I saw them corridors bending at impossible angles. Doors where there should have been walls. Shadows moved, independent of light, shapes stretching and twisting like liquid nightmares. We ran. The floor beneath us pulsed, flexed veins rising through the tiles. I tripped, my gloves scraping the ground. My sister cried out. I swung around, flashlight flickering, and saw him. The surgeon, floating inches above the floor, mask stitched tighter, veins writhing across his flesh. Black eyes bored into me. "You cannot escape," he whispered, not aloud. But inside my mind, behind him, the walls were crawling. Limbs emerged from concrete, faces pressed from tile, screaming, mouthing my name. The air thickened, my lungs burned. I wanted to breathe, but every inhale felt wrong, heavy with decay and wet blood. I grabbed my sister's hand. We had to move. Through the hallway, around bends, into a room that shouldn't exist, a morgue. Metal drawers lined the walls, all open, all empty, yet something stirred inside each. A whisper, a rustle. I swung my flashlight. Skeletons, dozens of them, climbed from the drawers, bones cracking as they moved, jaws opening in silent screams. I stumbled back, tripping over the wet tile. My sister clung tighter. The shadows lengthened. From the ceiling, pipes burst, spilling black water into the room. Faces emerged, dripping, sliding down the walls. I had to think, had to act. The surgeon moved closer, the veins across his arms pulsating. Every pulse made the walls vibrate. Shadows writhed in response. He reached, stitched fingers stretching unnaturally. I swung my flashlight, hitting his arm. Sparks flew, flesh hissed, veins recoiled. He screamed inside my skull, wet, pulsing, sound that made my teeth ache. We ran through the morgue, stepping over broken bones, past open drawers, through black water pooling ankle deep. Limbs grabbed at our legs, clawing, pulling, desperate to hold us back. The glow from my sister's body pulsed brighter. She was the heart of this nightmare, alive amidst decay. The corridor ahead split into two paths. One led to an elevator shaft. The metal doors warped and rusted. The other to a stairwell, twisting impossibly upward. I chose the stairs. I had to keep moving, keep her safe, keep breathing. The stairs narrowed. The walls pulsed in time with my heartbeat. Every step echoed in my ears. My gloves slipped on wet stone. The air grew thicker, heavier, tasting of rot and metal. Whispers followed. "David, David." They called my name from every direction. I couldn't tell if it was the walls, the water, or the entity itself. We reached a landing. A door loomed at the end, tall, black veins crawling across its surface. The glow from my sister intensified. She tugged at me, urging forward. I pushed the door open. The room was vast, endless. Water lapped at my boots. Shadows stretched across the ceiling like tentacles. In the center floated the column veins, bulging, faces pressing from within, mouths open in silent screams. The surgeon hovered above it, mask glistening, arms outstretched. The air trembled. Time stretched. My legs moved, but the ground felt like syrup. I could hear every heartbeat, every breath, every groan of the building. I had to act. I grabbed a length of pipe from the floor. The water hissed as I swung it at the column. Flesh tore. Faces shrieked. Limbs lashed at me, dragging, clawing. I swung again and again. My sister's glow pulsed with each strike. She was the key, the center, the anchor. The surgeon lunged. Stitched fingers stretched impossibly long. I blocked, swung, collided. Sparks and wet flesh flew. Veins writhed and hissed. He screamed inside my head. "You cannot leave," I shouted back. "I will." The room shifted. The water surged, rising above my waist. Faces emerged, skeletal and wet, climbing, grasping. I felt myself being pulled under. I swung wildly, but there were too many. The glow from my sister grew stronger, filling the room with white light. The columns shuddered. Faces screamed. Veins burst. Water boiled. I grabbed my sister. She screamed. Not in fear, but in recognition. Something inside her knew I was saving her. I pulled with all my strength. The entity writhed, twisting, pulsing, screaming. Limbs wrapped around us, dragging us into the black water. I fought, kicking, swinging, clawing free. The surgeon tried to reach me. I plunged the pipe into his chest. Veins burst. Flesh hissed. Faces recoiled into the column. The light from my sister intensified, blinding, pure. The column screamed, a sound that vibrated through my bones. Through the water, through the walls, we broke free. I dragged her through the water, through the writhing mass, toward a tunnel that seemed solid, real. The shadows recoiled. The whispers screamed, then faded. I climbed a ladder at the end of the tunnel. Light poured in. Sunlight. Real air. My lungs burned. My legs shook. My sister clung to me, trembling. Alive. Real. I glanced back once. The column writhed in the water. Limbs flailing. Faces screaming. The surgeon hovered above. Masks stitched. Eyes black pits. Watching. The walls of the tunnel pulsed. Veins bulging. Shadows crawling. We had survived. Yes. But the entity had not left. I carried my sister into the lobby. The hospital looked normal, or as normal as it could after what we had seen. Fluorescent lights flickered. The smell of antiseptic mixed with lingering rot. Shadows stretched across the walls, independent of light. I set her down. She looked at me, eyes wide, shivering, alive. And then the whispers returned. From the floor, from the walls, from the shadows. David, I knew then that St. Matthew's was alive, that it fed on fear, on death, on guilt, that it had followed us, even here, into the supposed safety of sunlight and air. The surgeon's voice pulsed in my skull. You cannot escape. I swallowed hard. I had faced the entity. I had survived. But the horror was far from over. Every instinct told me to leave, run, never return. But something deeper, darker, whispered, it was not finished with me, and I knew it never would be. The hospital above looked normal. Fluorescent lights hummed softly, the smell of antiseptic in the air, the soft beeping of machines in the distance. But I knew it was a lie. Every step I took, I could feel it, the pulse beneath the walls, the subtle vibration. In the floor, the watching shadows curling in corners where no light should fall. My sister clung to me, trembling. Her eyes were wide, fixed on me. She had survived the tunnels, the water, the twisted column, and yet I could see the lingering fear etched into her face. But the real terror was inside me, coiling, waiting. We moved cautiously through the lobby, avoiding security cameras and night staff. Every corridor looked slightly wrong, angles skewed, shadows stretching longer than physics would allow. Doors appeared where walls should be. Floors rippled like water. I pressed forward, dragging my sister toward the elevator bank, but the elevator doors were warped, sealed with veins pulsating beneath the metal. I cursed under my breath. There were only stairs, winding upward, twisting impossibly. Each step groaned, every tread slick with some black residue that made me question my grip. Behind me, a soft sound. Sloshing water. Whispering. I froze. My sister clutched my arm. I spun, flashlight trembling in my hands. The shadows shifted. Shapes moved in the corners of the corridor. Not reflections, not tricks of the light, solid, fluid. Wrong, and then I saw it. A figure wearing my sister's face, smiling now. A grotesque parody of her features. Eyes black pits, hair matted with slime. It held out its hands, wet, skeletal fingers brushing the floor, trailing black water that smelled of iron and rot. David, it whispered inside my mind, wet and slow. I swung the flashlight. Sparks flew. The thing shrieked. Not a sound from the throat, but a vibration through the air, the walls, the ground. I stumbled backward. The corridor stretched infinitely, turning on itself. The lights flickered. The whispers multiplied. I could hear hundreds of voices, calling my name, begging, laughing, screaming. Limbs emerged from the walls, from the floor, from the ceiling. Skeletons, half decomposed, crawling, reaching. Faces pressed through walls, mouths open, eyes hollow. I grabbed my sister. We ran down. Every step sent water sloshing through the warped hallway. My boots sank into puddles that seemed deeper than they should be. I swung my flashlight, striking skeletal hands, but for every one, I drove back. 2 more emerged. The walls throbbed. Veins bulged beneath the concrete. The air itself seemed alive, pulsating with hunger. We reached the stairwell. Narrow, twisted, impossible. My sister gasped, clinging to me. I felt her pulse, frantic, alive. I had to protect her. As we ascended, the stairwell changed. Steps stretched and warped. The ceiling lowered, brushing my helmet. Shadows curled around us, fingers of darkness seeking to touch skin, to drag us back. I swung my pipe at the nearest shadow. It solidified for a moment, flesh and bone, a hand trying to grasp my ankle, before dissolving into mist. Then the voice returned. Inside my head, the surgeon, stitched mask, veins pulsing, watching, waiting. You cannot escape. The words echoed in every corner of my mind. Pain shot through my temples. I gritted my teeth and moved faster. My sister cried softly. I whispered to her, "Keep moving, keep breathing." I was lying to her. I was lying to myself. The stairwell ended at a floor that shouldn't exist. The tiles were cracked, blackened, pulsing as if alive. Water pooled ankle deep. Reflections flickered my sister, me, twisted versions of ourselves. The shadows lengthened, reaching for us, faces pressing from the walls, mouths moving without sound. I realized then that the hospital itself was alive. Not just the tunnels, not just the column or the surgeon, but every wall, every floor, every shadow. It fed on fear, on death, on our desperation. We ran down a corridor that bent impossibly. Doors led nowhere. Corridors stretched forever. Limbs emerged from the walls, grasping, clawing. Skeletons climbed from the floor. Faces pressed through ceilings. Every step, I felt something pulling, tugging, trying to claim us. I swung my pipe, struck a skeleton. Bone cracked. Flesh hissed. The glow from my sister intensified, illuminating the grotesque forms around us. The surgeon emerged from the darkness ahead, mask stitched tight, veins pulsating, eyes black as void. He hovered, arms outstretched. The column lurched behind him, a mass of writhing flesh and faces pressing outward. I shouted, "I will not let you take her." The walls pulsed, limbs grabbed, faces screamed. Shadows pressed against my helmet. I felt myself slipping, the black water rising. My sister clung to me. Her glow pulsed. The entity shrieked. I swung the pipe wildly. Sparks flew, flesh tore, veins burst. Faces recoiled into the column. The surgeon screamed inside my skull, wet, hollow, painful. I lunged forward, grabbed my sister, pulled her through the black water, through the writhing mass. Limbs wrapped around us, dragging, clawing. I fought with every ounce of strength, swinging, kicking, clawing. The glow from my sister intensified, white and blinding. The column shuddered, faces screamed, veins hissed and tore. Shadows dissolved. The surgeon recoiled, mask cracking, veins bulging as he writhed. We broke free. I dragged her toward a tunnel, solid, real. The air lightened. The pulsing beneath the walls slowed. Whispers faded. Limbs recoiled. Faces disappeared. We reached a shaft of light. Sunlight. Clean air. I collapsed, gasping, boots soaked, gloves slick with slime and blood. My sister clung to me, trembling, alive. I thought we had survived, but deep inside, I felt it, watching, patient, immortal. The entity that had followed us, that had fed on. Fear and death still lingered beneath St. Matthew's. Even in sunlight, the shadows twisted unnaturally. I knew then that our nightmare was far from over. The hospital was alive, and it was hungry. The sunlight outside St. Matthew's should have been a relief. Warm, real, safe. But nothing about that hospital was safe anymore. Every step I took on the cracked pavement felt heavy, as if the building itself weighed me down. The air smelled clean, antiseptic, but I could still taste rot at the back of my throat. My sister walked beside me, trembling, shivering, but alive. Her glow soothing in the darkness had faded in the sunlight, but I could still feel the echo of it like a pulse inside me. She clung to my arm, silent, eyes wide. We moved cautiously along the side of the hospital. No one was around. The city was asleep. Or maybe it was just too far away to notice what was happening beneath the building. I had to know more. I had to find answers. The tunnels, the column, the surgeon, whatever it was that haunted St. Matthew's there, had to be a source, a route I could destroy. I found the service entrance. Metal doors warped, rusted, but I had the code. I pressed it, and the door creaked open. The smell hit me, instantly rot, decay, water, something sweetly metallic. My stomach churned. I swallowed and forced myself to enter. The stairs led downward. The sunlight faded. Every step took me closer to that living nightmare. I felt the pulse beneath the walls again, alive, watching, patient. Hungry, we reached a junction where the tunnels split. Water pooled, black and thick. Shadows stretched across the walls, independent of light. I gripped my sister's hand. Tightly. The surgeon appeared. Floating, stitched mask, veins pulsating. Black eyes locked onto mine. The column of flesh writhed behind him, faces pressed outward, screaming silently. Limbs emerged from water, clawing, grasping. I swung my pipe. Sparks flew as metal met bone and flesh. I blocked his outstretched hands. Veins hissed, twisted, writhed. Faces emerged, pressing from the column. My sister glowed brighter. I realized then that she was the anchor, the source of resistance. Without her, we would be lost. The surgeon screamed inside my skull. "You cannot escape." I shouted back. "We are not yours." He lunged. I blocked, swung, shoved. My sister cried, terrified, yet unbroken. Limbs from the column lashed at us. Faces pressed from walls, ceilings, floors. The tunnel pulsed, veins bulging. I fought with every ounce of strength I had. And then I saw it deeper within the column. Something solid, a core, dark, pulsating. Faces twisted around it, limbs wrapped around it. But it was the source. Destroy that, and perhaps we could end this. I turned to my sister. Her glow pulsed brighter. She nodded. I understood. Together, we had to reach it. We plunged into the black water. Limbs grabbed, skeletal hands, wet flesh, teeth snapping. I swung, pushed, kicked. She moved beside me, her glow cutting through the darkness, a beacon. The surgeon screamed, lunging, stitched fingers stretching impossibly long. Veins burst as I swung. We reached the core. Black, pulsating, alive. Veins twisted around it, like roots. Faces pressed outward, mouths opening, eyes wide. The glow from my sister merged with the darkness. I struck. Metal pipe connected with the core. Sparks flew. Flesh tore. Limbs flailed. Faces screamed. Water churned, black and viscous. The column shrieked, twisting violently. The surgeon screamed inside my skull. Pain, pressure, wet, hollow. I blocked it out. I struck again. Then my sister screamed. Not in fear, but in power. Her glow expanded, blinding. Veins shriveled. Faces dissolved. Limbs recoiled. The core quivered, pulsing violently. The surgeon floated above, mask cracking, veins tearing. I swung one final time. The pipe embedded in the core, Flesh ruptured, faces dissolved, shadows vanished. The water calmed. The pulse beneath the walls slowed. Silence. I stood in the tunnels, breathing hard, boots soaked, gloves slick. My sister clung to me, trembling, alive. The glow faded, but she was safe, or so I thought. The tunnels shifted subtly, a distant echo, whispers returning, not loud, not direct, but present, patient, hungry, alive. We climbed the stairs. The hospital above was quiet, still normal. The sunlight felt safe, but I knew better. The entity might be weakened, the column destroyed, but St. Matthew's was alive. It would wait, it would remember, it would hunger again. I carried my sister into the lobby. Fluorescent lights flickered. Shadows moved. I felt the pulse beneath the tiles, beneath the walls, alive, patient, eternal, and I understood. This nightmare was not over. The sunlight outside felt like a lie. The warmth, the quiet streets, the soft breeze, all contrasted sharply with what I had just survived. My legs trembled as I carried my sister down the cracked pavement, boots slick with black water from the tunnels. Every step I took felt heavy-weighted, as though the hospital itself had placed its hand upon my shoulders. She walked beside me now, trembling, pale, but alive. Her glow had faded, leaving only the echo of its presence, a pulsing vibration in the pit of my stomach. I could feel the remnants of the entity clinging to us, patient, waiting. We reached a taxi stand, deserted, empty, waiting like the world had paused. I glanced back at St. Matthew's. The hospital loomed, enormous and silent. Nothing moved, but I knew better. The pulse beneath its walls continued, faint but persistent. I slid my sister into the back seat of the taxi. The driver, an older man with tired eyes, gave me a curious glance. I forced a smile. I whispered a small, quick thank you, and we moved away. But even as the city streets passed, I could not escape it. Shadows stretched along the edges of my vision. Shapes flickered in the rearview mirror. Not my sister, not me, but something else. Something watching, waiting. Alive. Night fell. Darkness pressed against the windows. Every street lamp seemed dimmer, weaker. The taxi hummed along the quiet streets of Philadelphia, yet the world felt wrong. I rubbed my temples, trying to steady my breathing. The nightmares had followed us into daylight. I had to know what we were dealing with. The column, the surgeon, the pulsating core. What had we really faced? What had I freed or destroyed? I remembered the whispers in the tunnels. Not loud, not distinct, but persistent. David, David. It had been calling me, even now, inside my skull. Faint, but certain. We reached my apartment. Empty, dark, small, normal, or as normal as anything could be after surviving St. Matthew's. I locked the door, bolted it. Every instinct screamed that this would not stop it, that it had not left us. I sat on the couch, sister beside me, trembling. The apartment smelled of cleaning supplies, antiseptic, something neutral. But I could still taste black, water in my mouth, a residue of fear, of tunnels, of the thing we had fought. I tried to rest. Sleep, I thought, would help. But even as my eyes closed, I felt it. Beneath the floorboards, beneath the walls, in the corners of the room. Alive, watching. Patient dreams came, grotesque, vivid. I was back in the tunnels. The walls pulsed, veins bulging. Limbs reached from the floors, ceilings, walls. Faces pressed against the concrete, screaming, mouths open, eyes wide. My sister's glow appeared, but this time flickering, weak. The surgeon appeared in the dream. Stitched mask, veins pulsating, eyes black pits. He floated above the column, writhing flesh, faces pressing outward. He whispered inside my mind, "You cannot leave." I woke with a start. My sister was still asleep beside me, curled up, trembling. I touched her shoulder, warm, real, alive. But I knew the nightmare had followed us into reality. The next day, the city seemed normal. People walked the streets, cars honked, the sun glinted off windows, but every shadow was suspect. Every stranger, every passerby could be a twisted remnant, a watcher, a pawn of the entity that haunted us. I researched old hospital records, missing persons, death certificates, patients that had vanished, surgeons that had disappeared, staff that had never returned. St. Matthew's was a nexus, a feeding ground, a living entity, and I had touched it, fought it, survived it. The more I learned, the more I realized that survival did not mean freedom. The entity remembered. It waited, patient, immortal. That night, the whispers returned. Faint at first, a soft susurration beneath the floorboards. David, David. I tried to block it out, tried to ignore it, but then the walls moved, subtly at first, almost imperceptibly, then more pronounced. Veins rose beneath the plaster. Shadows stretched unnaturally across the floor. My sister clutched me. She whispered, "I can feel it. I know it's here." I realized then that St. Matthew's had not been destroyed. The column was gone, perhaps weakened, but the surgeon, the entity, its essence, it had followed us. The air grew heavy. The apartment pulsed. Breathing became difficult. Limbs reached from the walls, shadows crawling, pressing. Faces appeared in mirrors, in windows, mouths opening, eyes hollow, silent, watching. I grabbed a pipe, anything to defend us. My sister clutched my arm, trembling. Her glow appeared faintly, flickering. A beacon, a promise of resistance. The surgeon appeared in the apartment, stitched mask, veins pulsating, floating above the floor. Black eyes, boring into mine. He whispered inside my mind. "You cannot escape," I shouted. "We are not yours." The walls pulsed, limbs clawed, faces pressed, shadows writhed. The air itself seemed alive, thick, heavy, metallic. I swung my pipe. Sparks flew, flesh hissed, limbs recoiled. The surgeon screamed inside my skull, wet, hollow, painful. I realized then that the fight was not over. We had survived, yes, but this entity was patient, eternal. It could not be destroyed, only delayed. I had to find a way to protect my sister, to survive, to outlast it. But deep inside, I knew the truth. St. Matthew's, the tunnels, the surgeon, the column, they were only part of it. The entity was everywhere, waiting, watching, patient, and we were not safe. The apartment had become a battlefield. Shadows curled in corners, stretching impossibly. The walls pulsed like veins. Limbs clawed from floors, ceilings, and walls. Faces pressed from the plaster, eyes wide, mouths open, silent but screaming. Every breath felt heavy, weighted with something unseen, something alive. My sister's glow flickered beside me. She clung to my arm, trembling but determined. I gripped a pipe, the metal cold and solid in my hands. Sparks flew as I swung it at the nearest shadow. Flesh hissed, limbs recoiled, faces vanished into the walls. Then he appeared, the surgeon, floating above the floor, mask stitched tight, veins pulsating across his face and arms, black pits where his eyes should have been. The column of flesh was gone, destroyed in the tunnels, but he remained, a fragment, a remnant, patient, immortal, relentless. "You cannot escape," he whispered inside my mind, wet, hollow, pressing, pain, fear, hunger. I shouted back, "We are not yours." The air thickened, the shadows writhed, the floor pulsed beneath me, limbs lashed out, clawing, grasping. I swung wildly. Sparks flew, flesh hissed, veins twisted, faces screamed, pressing from the walls. The apartment itself was alive, a reflection of the horrors beneath St. Matthew's. My sister's glow strengthened. I realized then that she was more than a beacon. She was the anchor, the resistance. The entity could not claim her entirely. Without her, we would have been lost long ago. The surgeon lunged, stitched fingers stretching impossibly long, veins bulging. I blocked, swung, shoved. Sparks flew as pipe met flesh. A wet, hollow scream echoed inside my skull. Pain, pressure. I gritted my teeth, swinging again. The shadows coalesced. Forms emerged, limbs, faces, skeletal bodies, all drawn to the surgeon. He controlled them, bending them, commanding them. The apartment became a vortex of horror. Water pooled, black and thick. Limbs clawed, faces pressed, shadows writhed. I realized then the truth. The surgeon was the core, a fragment of the entity itself. Destroy him, and perhaps we could weaken it, delay it, maybe even survive. I shouted to my sister, "Stay close, focus, glow." She nodded. Her glow pulsed, white and bright, cutting through the darkness. Limbs recoiled, shadows shrieked and dissolved, faces pressed back, eyes wide. Sparks flew as I swung my pipe, striking at the surgeon. Veins hissed, flesh tore. He screamed inside my mind, pain, hunger, wet, hollow. I blocked it out, swinging again. We moved together, forward, toward him, every step a battle. Limbs grabbed, shadows lashed, faces pressed, black water surged, thick and viscous. I kicked, swung, shoved. Sparks flew, flesh hissed, veins twisted and shriveled. The surgeon floated above the pool of darkness, stitched mask, veins pulsating, eyes black pits. He laughed inside my mind, wet and hollow. "You cannot destroy me." I struck again. Pipe connected with flesh. Sparks flew. Limbs recoiled. Shadows shrieked. Faces dissolved. My sister glowed brighter. Together, we reached him. I swung one final time. Metal connected with the core of his chest. Veins ruptured. Flesh hissed and tore. Limbs flailed violently. Faces dissolved. Shadows scattered. He screamed inside my skull. Wet, hollow, eternal. Pain, hunger, and then silence. The apartment shifted. The air cleared. Shadows dissolved. The pulse beneath the wall slowed. The remnants of the entity retreated, patient, waiting, but weakened. I sank to the floor, boots wet, gloves slick. My sister clung to me, trembling alive. The glow faded, but she was safe. For now, I knew then that survival was temporary. The entity was patient. It remembered. It would wait. It would return. But we had fought. We had survived. We had hope. And hope was dangerous to the entity. The night fell like a suffocating curtain. The city outside our apartment looked peaceful, ordinary, unaware, but I knew better. Shadows lengthened unnaturally. Streetlights flickered. Every corner hid a presence, patient, waiting. St. Matthew's had not forgotten us. The surgeon was gone, destroyed or, at least, broken, but the entity endured, watching, following. We tried to rest, tried to sleep, but the apartment was not safe. Every floorboard creaked with whispers. Every shadow moved against the grain of light. Faces appeared in windows, in mirrors, pressing, hollow, silent, but screaming. The air was heavy, metallic, tasting of black water and decay. I clutched my sister. She clung to me, trembling. Her glow was faint now, but still present, an anchor in the encroaching darkness. I whispered, "We have to stay calm. We have to wait it out." But the truth was clear. There was no waiting out an entity like this. I tried to distract myself with research, hospital records, news articles, old photographs. Every lead pointed to St. Matthew's as a nexus of death, fear, and inexplicable disappearances. But nothing explained how it had followed us, how it had embedded itself into reality outside the tunnels. By midnight, the apartment shifted. The walls pulsed, subtle at first, then violently. Veins rose beneath the plaster. The floor rippled. Shadows curled, reaching. Faces appeared, pressing, mouths moving without sound. Limbs reached from corners, floorboards, ceilings. My sister whimpered. I held her closer. I whispered, I'm here. I won't let it touch you. Then I saw him, or what remained. A twisted fragment of the surgeon appeared in the corner, mask cracked, veins bulging, black eyes fixed on me. He floated, reaching impossibly long fingers toward us. Behind him, shadows moved like liquid, curling and stretching across the room. You cannot hide, he whispered inside my mind. Wet, hollow, patient. I gripped my pipe. I swung, sparks flying as metal met something solid, but wrong. Limbs recoiled. Faces dissolved into shadows. But the fragment of the surgeon laughed inside my skull, echoing, endless. We had no choice. We had to move. Out into the streets, away from the apartment. The city was quiet, unnaturally so. Shadows twisted along the sidewalks. Streetlights flickered and dimmed. Every passing car seemed to elongate, headlights stretching into grotesque forms. Faces appeared in windows, mouths open, eyes black pits. They followed us, patient, silent, waiting. We ran. My sister clutched my hand. Every step echoed with whispers. David, David. They called my name from every shadow, every corner, every reflective surface. Limbs reached for us, grabbing, clawing. Faces pressed against walls, windows, doors. The city itself was alive, twisted, feeding on fear. We reached an alley, narrow, wet, flickering lights. Shadows pressed closer. Limbs lashed from walls. Faces screamed silently. The fragment of the surgeon floated above, stitched mask glistening, veins pulsing. He raised his hands. Shadows surged, coalesced, forming grotesque shapes. Limbs' faces, skeletal forms all drawn to him, controlled by him. I swung the pipe. Sparks flew. Limbs recoiled. Faces dissolved. Shadows hissed, twisting. The fragment screamed inside my skull. Wet, hollow, eternal. Pain, hunger. My sister's glow pulsed, stronger, brighter, white, cutting through the darkness. Limbs recoiled. Shadows shrieked and scattered. Faces pressed back, dissolving. Together, we moved forward, dodging, weaving, striking. We reached a street intersection. The city seemed endless, warped. Shadows stretched impossibly. Streetlights bent downward, dripping black liquid. Faces pressed against windows. Limbs reached from doors, alleys, drains. The fragment of the surgeon hovered above, directing, commanding. I realized then that we were being hunted. Not just by him, but by St. Matthew's itself. Every street, every building, every shadow had become a weapon, a trap, a reflection of the tunnels we had fled. We ran, dodging shadows, striking at limbs and faces with the pipe. Sparks flew, flesh hissed. The fragments screamed inside my skull. Pressure, pain, hunger. My sister's glow intensified, pushing back the darkness, keeping us alive, guiding us through the maze of warped streets. We reached a park. Open space. Real. Hard to tell. Shadows clung to trees, twisted along paths. Faces pressed from the ground, screaming silently. Limbs erupted from the soil. The fragment of the surgeon hovered above, veins pulsating, mask stitched tight. He raised his hands. Shadows surged, writhing, forming a column of flesh. I knew then that the entity was not done. It would not stop. Patient, eternal, relentless. It hunted us, feeding on fear, feeding on the echoes of St. Matthew's. We had survived the tunnels, survived the apartment. But this was different. The world itself had become part of the nightmare. Every step, every breath, every shadow was a threat. My sister's glow pulsed, white, blinding. I realized then that she was not just an anchor, she was a weapon. The entity recoiled from her light. Limbs dissolved, shadows scattered, faces retreated. Together, we moved forward, through the warped city, fighting, dodging, surviving. The fragment of the surgeon followed, relentless, directing the shadows, the limbs, the faces, patient, eternal, hungry. And I understood then the truth. We would never be safe. The entity had followed us into reality. It had learned, adapted, waited, and it would continue to hunt, patient, eternal, until it claimed us. The city had transformed into a nightmare. Streets bent unnaturally, buildings twisted toward the sky like skeletal hands. Shadows lengthened, independent of light, crawling along walls, spreading over sidewalks, reaching for us. Faces pressed from windows, from doors, from the pavement itself, mouths open, eyes hollow. Limbs erupted from drains, manholes, alleyways. The entity had followed us. St. Matthew's had not been confined to the tunnels. It had grown, spread into the world above, patient, hungry, eternal. My sister clung to my arm. Her glow pulsed faintly, dimmed by exhaustion but still present, a fragile beacon in the consuming darkness. I gripped my pipe, the metal cold, heavy, and real in my hands. Sparks flew as I swung at the nearest shadow. Flesh hissed, limbs recoiled. But for every form I destroyed, two more emerged. Then he appeared, the surgeon, mask stitched tight, veins pulsating across his arms and face, black pit's 4 eyes, floating above the warped street. Behind him, shadows moved as if alive, forming grotesque shapes, limbs, skeletal forms, half-fleshed faces. He raised his hands, and the shadows surged, coalesced, a writhing column of darkness. "You cannot escape," he whispered inside my mind, wet, hollow, patient, hunger, fear, pain. I shouted, "We are not yours." The air thickened. Every breath was heavy, metallic. Limbs clawed at us from walls, pavement, even the air itself. Faces pressed against every surface, mouths moving without sound. The city itself had become an extension of the tunnels, alive, feeding on terror. We ran. I swung my pipe, striking limbs, dispersing shadows. Sparks flew, flesh hissed, faces dissolved, limbs retracted. My sister glowed brighter. I realized then that her light was not just a shield, it was a weapon. The entity recoiled from it, unable to fully consume her. We reached an open plaza, the buildings around twisted skyward, skeletal fingers reaching for the clouds. Shadows surged, pooling, forming grotesque towers of flesh and bone. The surgeon floated above, veins pulsing, stitched masks glistening, with black moisture. This was the core of it. The fragment of the entity that had followed us. The source of its hunger, its patience, its immortality. Destroy this, and perhaps we could weaken it, delay it, survive. I turned to my sister. Her glow pulsed, white and blinding. I shouted, "Together, now." She nodded. Together, we charged. Limbs lashed at us, shadows writhed, faces pressed. Sparks flew from my pipe, flesh hissed, veins twisted, shriveled, snapped, faces dissolved, shadows recoiled. The surgeon screamed inside my skull. Wet, hollow, eternal, pain, hunger. We reached the base of the shadow column. My sister extended her hands, glowing intensely. Light streamed outward, white and pure, cutting through the darkness. Limbs writhed, faces screamed silently, shadows recoiled, and the city seemed to shiver under the intensity. I struck with all my strength. Pipe connected with the surgeon's chest. Veins ruptured. Flesh tore. Sparks flew. Limbs flailed violently. Faces dissolved. Shadows scattered. He screamed inside. My skull. Wet, hollow, eternal, pain, hunger, and then silence. The plaza shifted, pulsed, then stilled. The shadows dissipated. The buildings righted themselves. The twisted streets returned to normal. The entity was weakened, fragmented, patient, but diminished. My sister clung to me, trembling. Her glow faded. Alive, real, safe, for now. I looked around. The city seemed normal again. Streetlights steady, people moving unaware, the smell of asphalt and rain in the air. But I knew the truth. The entity was patient, eternal. It would wait. It would remember, and it would return. I had survived the tunnels, the apartment, the streets, but the battle was not over. It never would be. We had hope, and hope was dangerous to the entity. The city was quiet, too quiet. The air smelled of rain and asphalt, but beneath it, a faint metallic tense lingered. My sister and I walked slowly, boots splashing in puddles, hands clasped tightly. Her glow had faded, leaving only the faintest pulse, a heartbeat in sync with my own, alive, real, safe. For now, we reached a small park, benches slick with rain, leaves trembling in the breeze. The city seemed ordinary, unaware of what had just occurred, but I knew better. St. Matthew's, the tunnels, the surgeon, the entity, they were patient, eternal. They waited. Somewhere, beyond the streets, beyond the buildings, beneath the asphalt. The pulse still lingered, faint but unmistakable. I sat on a bench, exhausted, soaked, gloves slick, pipe resting across my knees. My sister sat beside me, trembling, clutching my arm. Her eyes were wide, staring at nothing, at everything. I whispered, "It's over, for now." She shook her head. Not over. I knew she was right. The entity had been weakened, the fragment of the surgeon destroyed, but patient, eternal. It would remember, it would wait, and it would return. The city continued around us, unaware, normal. Children played in the distance. Cars honked. Dogs barked. Birds called from the trees. The world had returned to its ordinary rhythm, but we could not. I remembered the tunnels, the column of flesh, the black water, the whispers. I remembered the shadows that followed us into the streets, the limbs, the faces, the screaming silence. Every memory pressed against my skull, unrelenting. I realized then that survival was temporary. Freedom was an illusion. The entity had followed us into reality, into the city, into our lives. It had adapted, learned, grown stronger, and it would wait, patient, eternal, hungry. We stood and walked slowly toward the edge of the park. My sister clutched my hand, her pulse trembling against mine. I felt her fear, her strength, her glow, faint but present. Together, we were a force against the darkness, but alone, we were vulnerable. The nights would come, shadows would twist, faces would press, limbs would lash, whispers would return. David, David, they would call my name, and I would remember. I would feel the pull, the hunger, the patient presence of the entity waiting, eternal. But for now, we had survived. We reached a small apartment, quiet, unremarkable, safe. I locked the door, bolted it. My sister sat on the couch, trembling, exhausted, alive. I sat beside her, holding her close, feeling the warmth, the heartbeat, the glow that remained faintly. A promise of life. I could not sleep, could not rest. The entity was patient, eternal, but I could plan, prepare, resist. Outside, the city slept, unaware. Inside we breathed, fragile and alive. The darkness had retreated, but not vanished. It waited. It would return, patient, eternal, hungry. I whispered to my sister, "I will protect you, always." She nodded, clutching my arm, trembling, alive. Her glow flickered faintly, white and steady, alive, real, safe. For now, the rain tapped against the window, soft and rhythmic, masking the faint pulse beneath the asphalt, beneath the walls, beneath the city. Patient, eternal, hungry, we had survived the tunnels, the apartment, the streets, the shadows, the surgeon, the fragment, but the entity endured. It remembered, it waited, and it would return, and when it did, we would be ready, or we would be consumed. But for now, we were alive. And that was enough.